Welcome to another episode of Critical Perspectives with Tony Macklin. In this conversation, we speak with Tony about the art of the interview. Tony's had a lot of experience throughout his professional career in perfecting this art, as he's conducted intimate one-on-one conversations with giants like Alfred Hitchcock, John Wayne, Sam Peckinpah, and many others. You can read transcripts and hear audio clips for many of these interviews on his website at tonymacklin.net.
I have a question to start it with, for you, if you're okay.
Please.
You're
Sure.
Okay. Here you are. The other day, you said on Facebook that you often didn't go up to stars or people you appreciated because you were shy. Would you explain that? And then I'd like to respond to it. No, really.
Yeah, I have social anxiety. I always have, and it's the oddest thing because when I'm on the phone and I'm talking, it could be anybody. It could be somebody like Coppola. When I'm on my turf, I feel completely comfortable. But face to face, I always second guess myself. What if I'm interrupting them? What if I say something embarrassing? All of these thoughts run through my head. It's just an anxiety I have.
Let me put a good spin on it. I would say it's more because I share not the shyness, but I think it's a professionalism that I know I don't want to be part of the crowd that's trying to be part of the celebrity experience. I think that about only 2 or 3 times have I ever gone up to somebody, and then it was really a purpose. I remember being in New York with the media. There was a press conference, a fairly small one, with Roger Moore, and there was a book, I think it was about one of the Bond films, and I was really almost appalled that after that all the media ran up for his autograph, and I thought, whoa, that's not what I would do as a critic. I would maybe have a one-on-one on him, but I'm not part of that celebrity experience at all. So I would say that it may be part social anxiety, but I think it's also part perspective, the interviewer's perspective, that you're not just a fan. I mean, that's part of you. I'll tell you one experience that I had when I was a fan. I met Gabe Dell, who was on. He was in many of the Bowery Boys pictures. He played a reporter, one of their peers, one of their friends, and I had always loved Hans Hall, who played Satch in the Bowery Boys. I'd sit there eating my Tootsie Rolls and M&Ms and just glory in Satch's behavior and attitude and what he was. Well, Gabe, we went to a bar after the shooting on Earthquake. We went to a bar, and he called Hunt on the phone, and I got to talk to him on the phone. He wasn't going to come down to the bar. I was hoping he would, but I got to be a child again and just be totally in the experience. I also, when the American Film Institute used to have their polls of the best actor and the best comedy and the best mystery and so forth, I put as one of my 10 best actors Hunt Hall, and Robert Wilkos became a friend of mine, and the LA Times wrote about that, and that was kind of one of the ways that I first got some attention. But in that experience, that was a personal experience, but I've very, very seldom had that kind of thing. I had one other that when Peckinpah was showing The Wild Bunch the first time in the complete version, the European version. He showed it in L.A. And it was maybe the only time, I think it was the only time in my life that I've stood in the rain waiting to get into a movie. And I went up to him because I had known his friend Tom Grice, who was a friend of mine, the director who did Will Penny. He died young, but he was an excellent director. and tried to get Sam to say he would do an interview with me, and he actually did in that case. And I had not used Tom's name, but he said, "Oh, is Tom here?" I said, "No, but I'm a friend of his." And so those were the two personal experiences that I had.
Well, I'm just like you. I'm not celebrity obsessed, but I am in awe, as I'm sure you are, of the talents that have meant so much to me in my life. And I mean, my major idol in the artistic world has always been Al Pacino. So in '99, I got a chance to meet him because I flew from Florida to L.A. to see a play of his, and I did something I've never done before. I wrote a fan letter. I don't even know how to write a fan letter. And I gave it to the stage manager, and he came out and he said, "Would you like to meet Al after the show?" So I went backstage with my friend, and I spent maybe 5 minutes with him. But he was the one that brought up, "Would you like an autograph?" And I said, "Oh, well, sure." I actually would have never thought of asking for an autograph, because what does that do for me? I've never understood the autograph craze.
One thing, you didn't go up and try and knock on his door or try and wait outside to get a glimpse of him. You sent him a note, and that's a professional thing to do. Despite it being a fan letter, so that's just the tone that you're taking.
I want to know how you got started, because I don't think we've really covered that before. You went to the University of Dayton?
That's correct.
Did you study?
I went to Villanova. When I started at Dayton, I didn't have a PhD. So I was probably going to be one and out. I was supposed to go to I attended a PhD course at the University of Cincinnati on a year of Shakespeare's plays was the paper that finally drove me out of the program. I said, "No, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to create this magazine." And I created a film magazine, and at the time, I think it was probably one of the three best in the whole country, Film Heritage. And that opened the door for me, because there really wasn't much film study. Film would be studied at the University of California and places like that, but across the country there weren't film courses, and I certainly taught one of the first film courses in Ohio. That I'm sure of. So that's kind of how I got my start, because I've always loved film and I've always loved literature, and those two things combined in a blessed combustion.
Well, obviously you've always had a wonderful appreciation of film, and you've been terrifically articulate and observant about films. When did you reach the comfort zone? When did you realize that I can actually talk to artists as if I am a colleague? When did you find that confidence?
First time I spoke. That sounds like ego, but they're people. And they appreciate you prepare a lot, and that helps a great deal, because they are so used to people not getting what their work. They don't understand what they're doing. And if you say something like I said to Duke Wayne, I said about the last shot in The Searchers, you gave that pose, and he said, "Oh, you noticed that." That was my homage to Harry Carey. And so immediately, I don't say we're equals, but we're on the same plane, we're on the same level of interpretation. And one of the things that I found is that, I think I've told you this story before, but you as an interpretive critic, you know that the artist, whoever it may be, does his or her work and then puts it out there for other reactions, for other responses. People may see things in their work that they didn't intend. I remember talking to Warren Beatty about shampoo, and I said to him, "Yes or no, did you in some way base the character on Robert Kennedy? He walked in the beach, he loses the girl to Les. There was all kinds of things and he said, no. And then later, he told somebody, he said, that son of a bitch saw something in my film that I didn't see.
Well, and it's interesting listening to the recording of that, because I guess the next guy starts his question, and then Warren Beatty comes back to you and says,
right.
That's a fascinating question.
Either yours or Town's mind. Now, either yes or no.
Yeah.
Does Jackie represent Jackie Kennedy?
No.
Okay.
That's my style. How did you first conceive this as 1968?
That's a fascinating question. It really is. And I'll tell you something about film and talking about film. And you may be pointing out something there that's important. And because neither Robert nor I intend this, and in fact has never thought of it, doesn't mean it's not there.
And he brings up a good point, and which you just echoed. A lot of times the artist isn't aware of subtext. They're expressing something, but that doesn't mean that they've worked it all out. And I think some artists might actually feel that if they did work all of that out, they would lose it somehow. They don't want.
They don't want to explain the work. I think we'd have a hard time getting Kubrick to explain his work. Yeah. And I know a couple times I contacted him, and he wanted it to. If I thought something that was valid, he accepted it because it was part of what his work. I mean, his work wasn't just narrowly constrained by his own personal vision, but he gave it to other people. That's what you hope to do. J.D. Salinger, Jerome David Salinger, never explained Holden Caulfield. He left it for other people, and the mystery of who is this guy, what is this guy, the value of it, the extent of it, the range of it. If you explain it away, I mean, that's for me to do, and you to do. That you can explain some things about the work, but the artist really shouldn't explain his own work. Sometimes an artist is almost forced to do it because people are so wrong. They don't understand it at all. I remember Edward Albee, when Tiny Alice came out, he gave a presentation on the stage trying to contradict, clarify the misinterpretations that had gone on. I mean, it's okay to interpret if the interpretation makes any kind of sense, but so often the critic does not understand, or especially the reviewer does not understand, because he's only bringing his own personal limited experience and his expectations of the work. And in the interview with when Altman called me on the phone, now this may have been partially just of the moment, but he said that Buffalo Bill and the Indians was his favorite film. Now, he'd never said that before, and I think he said it because of the context of our conversation. But sometimes you see the unexpected comes up, and the audience participating makes the work. Unfortunately, it takes a long way for them to see the lights that people cast on the past so that they can go forward, so that they can evolve. And that's what we as critics try to do. We try to cast some enlightenment for people to at least think about something and bring their own context, their own particular insight into it, and to have it grow.
Were most of the interviews you did, were they for Film Heritage?
Yeah, they were. And you were talking about the different people, and I recommended to you that documentary, that guy who was in that thing, and I saw it again the other night, and I really, really like it. I really hope your listeners will search it out, seek it out, because it really gives you a whole different sense of the character actor. But Stanley Camel, who was the psychiatrist in the TV show Monk, said he never had a bad experience. And I must confess that I don't think I did as an interviewer. Of course, I didn't interview everybody, like I don't have to review or criticize all films, which spares me from having to deal with assholes and having to deal with the work that is worthless, is useless. But I was very fortunate, and one thing I've discovered that maybe you have too, is that these people that I interviewed, whether it be Jimmy Stewart or Hitch or Heston or Edith Head or whoever, they're special people. Mm-hmm. They really are. They are not just actors. There is something spiritual. When I was with Jimmy Stewart down in Wheeling, West Virginia, I sat next to him, and we had steak dinners outside, and they put me on the right side of him. Here's another thing that you find out when you're in an interview or in a personal situation. I didn't realize that he was deaf in one ear, and so they put me on his good side. But in Wheeling, West Virginia, all the people were flocking to the premiere, and there was a line that went miles. And he was like two people. He was very, very polite, but it was like he was present physically, but not present in terms of the real Jimmy Stewart. The real Jimmy Stewart was held back, and that was a very instructive, interesting experience that I had.
When I look back through your interviews, I'm particularly struck by Robert Altman. I mean, he gave you a lot of time. It wasn't he didn't make you suffer through a rush job. He was really open to exploring whatever avenues you wanted to bring up, wasn't he?
Robert Altman said to me, "You're one of the very best critics in the country," and I had gotten on his wavelength. And he had read my reviews, and Sam Peckinpah subscribed to Film Heritage. But so many of this, it's time and place, and it takes a long time. It must have taken me 20 years to get Duke Wayne, and another 20 to get Clint Eastwood. But when we got together, it was on the set of Three Women in Palm Beach, at a motel in Palm Beach. What happens, I can talk to people about other things. So we talked about gambling. Altman and I talked about gambling as well. And with Peckinpah, after he said, "Fuck you," as we began the interview, what kind of a fucking question is that? We started talking about our kids playing soccer.
Okay, I wanted to find out.
Could I have some more gin?
Basically,
no tonic, just soda and lime.
one thing that I never understood, and somebody asked me to ask you this, and you were quoted once as saying that David and Straw Dogs, and I guess you've clarified this, but I've never seen it, is really a, quote, villain, unquote, in Straw Dogs. Now, how am I supposed to see that?
Here's a man who's running away, a lot of violence. He's got, a little academic wife, with a very nice ass. There are 18 different places in that film, if you look at it, where he could have stopped the whole thing. He didn't. He let it go on.
Well, I'd like to see Susan George be an academic wife. I have a hard time equating that with anything that I've ever seen.
She is. She really is. She didn't act that part at all. She was Amy. And that's why I cast her.
But she's terrifically sensual. Are academic wives?
Yeah. Even professors fuck on occasion.
And every review, I didn't have one interview that was rushed. I mean, I spent an hour and 45 minutes sitting next to Clint Eastwood. I spent 3 hours in Duke Wayne's home the first time and had lunch with him and his mistress. And it was a wonderful experience. So I've been fortunate in that I'm not a hit-and-run interviewer. It's got to be worth my time as well as his time, or her time as well.
Yeah.
When I was on the set of Earthquake, I was talking about Earthquake previously, I stood next to a woman. I don't think I ever talked to her. You're talking about being shy. I wasn't shy. I was bewitched. I was frozen in stone. I stood next to Ava Gardner.
Oh, man.
And I don't know what pheromones or what mysterious, magical aroma, aura she put out, but I think I was comatose at that point.
Did you find that artists like Altman, that they were naturally introspective?
Oh, sure, of course. I mean, these are bright, creative individuals, and what we do is we judge them on so many of the fools who talk to them, or so many of the fools who write about them.
It's all about the work and the creative process too. I mean, it's not anything uncomfortable or beyond the sphere of, what our investment in their work is, which is another difference. I'm sure that probably people are very guarded because they're used to being asked the gossipy, tabloidish questions, and we're interested in the art.
One thing that happened to me, the interview that I didn't get, that I wanted to get, was just because of that. I had an interview set up with Jack Nicholson, and just before that interview, somebody had published a piece in People magazine about him, and he canceled all of his interviews. Because it was crap, because it was that kind of insensitive exploitation, and he just didn't want to talk. And you can understand that. You can understand that so many of the people that you hear simply don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. And they have their own axe to grind or their own shiv to sharpen.
I honestly regard Nicholson amongst living people in film as the brass ring, but he'll occasionally do a lengthy printed interview for someone like Rolling Stone, but very rarely. But that has to be the gold standard, Nicholson now. I mean, is that the one that got away that you most regret?
Yes, it is. Because I know we're the same age. He's from Jersey. I'm from Philly. I really know his work, and I know that on Facebook some of our friends do not like The Passenger. Well, I love The Passenger.
I do too.
And I love The King of Marvin Gardens. Is one of my favorite films. Mm-hmm. Which he was in, and 5 Easy Pieces. I wrote a piece that, in fact, Rafelson, the director, when I sent the magazine to him with my piece on my criticism of 5 Easy Pieces, he sent it back with notations. He said, "This is good," and no, here. So I have that in my library. By the way, when you set up the interviews for me, I have to visit my critic's cave, and I've found an interview that I'm going to post of a phone call from Jenna Rollins that I didn't know I had.
Wow! And
I never published it, but it's a very nice. And my wife listened to it. I don't very often listen to myself. I don't know about you, but I live in the future.
I certainly love your writing, but since we're discussing interviews, in terms of those audio recordings of your interviews, they are so important now more than ever, because they keep these giants of filmmaking alive for the younger generations. I mean, I think they're essential.
What is really nice about them also that I've realized, again, recently, is that there's something different in hearing it on tape, audibly, than just reading the printed page. You can listen to the interview with Duke Wayne and hear him mispronounce non-entity as nonity. You can listen to Hitchcock and see how many times I had to cut well. He had started every sentence with a well. You get a. I'm not saying you, but you get the warts, and you get
you get the intonation and the tone, and you get a whole wealth of other stuff that can't be transcribed. Yeah. Let me ask you about Peckinpah. I mean, from the outside, we see, and tell me how much of this is accurate. We see Peckinpah as a very hardened figure, kind of tortured and embittered by the way the industry treated him. And I see him as a figure that always worked out those demons and that angst in his work. Is that accurate?
I think so, absolutely. But what is incredible is, despite all of his nasty, horrible experiences with producers and studios, the films that he created are incredible, are phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Wild Bunch. I especially like
was it Pat
Garrett and Billy the Kid. Yes, there's all this brokenness and there's all this meanness and all this alcoholic rage and destruction, devastation. But that is a beautiful film. And Junior Bonner is such a human testament to living in the West with Steve McQueen. Mm-hmm. So that if he didn't have that broken, desperate, insecure, alcoholic personality, we wouldn't have 4 or 5 masterpieces.
Right. He wouldn't be the same artist. That's absolutely.
No.
And he was someone that liked to engage with his critics, or with critics, because I know of his kind of back and forth relationship with Pauline Kael, and Kael obviously loved him. I mean, so much that she gave a rave of something like Convoy.
That's fantastic. The whole technique that you have that the public, I don't think, knows. And I think part of the reason...
I don't think it matters.
It really doesn't matter to you.
You know, I think that now that I've reached a point in my career where it's really hard to get parts to fit me anymore, you know, because I never allowed myself to play, you know, like Coop and Gable. They'd reached a maturity where they shouldn't be playing with these younger girls, and it quite obviously affected their audience. Motion pictures is like sitting in a room with someone and talking across the table, and if you overact, they're quite obvious of it. Now, if it's your ego and it's a flamboyancy, they accept it and have fun with it. But you can't overact in a picture unless it is that. Or you can't show histrionics beyond a certain point, you know, because you're right there. Now, you can say, well, pardon me, I want to go to the restroom and come back from the party and sit down and talk to somebody else. But if you're in a goddamn theater and you're sitting in the middle of an aisle, and this fella does that, you're uncomfortable, and now you're not with him, you're looking at him now. And when you start looking at him, he's lost you.
Your interview with Wayne is actually the best, most revealing interview I've ever read of his, because you get a sense of Wayne behind the veneer that is painted of him, behind the Duke image. And what you find is someone that's very thoughtful about how his image is used in the films that he worked on.
Well, two things actually. When you talk to these people, you do realize that there's thought behind them, and they are creative. They're not just pawns. They're not just entities. Also, you were talking about getting autographs. Well, after that interview, Wayne sent me a signed, inscribed picture and said, "Tony, you caught me in print as nobody ever has. Thanks, Duke." And that was kind of special.
Well, that's exactly right, and it's obvious from reading the interview that which is in your book, the Voices from the Set book. It's remarkable. You met Scorsese pretty early in his career.
Very early, yeah.
It was around Alice.
Alice doesn't live here anymore. Had just come out, and I drove up the street in L.A. and he had an apartment way up the hill, Restaurant Row, whatever street that is, and way up in the hill. And I interviewed him in his apartment. When I went in and we were having the interview, all his wall was just covered with books, with film books and all kinds of books. And he had to talk to somebody on the phone, so I said, well, I'll step outside the apartment. And I did, and I was trying to write all the titles I had seen down on, because they were really impressive.
And that's, in other words, what I'd like to do, the next two pictures, Taxi Driver and New York, New York, whichever one comes first, I'd like to, Taxi is a very strong New York type picture. But it's not like Main Street. It deals with a cab driver from the Midwest who's working in New York as a cab. So it's a very strange film. But New York, New York is also going to be strange because it's like the musical of the 40s, really. It takes place in 1945 to 1952, that whole period, the decline of the big bands and all that. And it seems to me that New York, New York, and Taxi are going to be radically different from each other. And together they're going to be radically different from Alice, and all together they're going to be radically different from Mean Streets in a sense. So, and then I feel I can go back and do something that has a Mean Streets type quality to it.
I think that good interviewing is like good acting, where listening is actually more than half of the job. And when people go in there with a pre-prepared list of questions, a lot of times that can be a crutch for them, and it distracts them from actually listening to the person they're interviewing.
It's funny. First of all, I think you're right on. You're spot on. No, I think that preparation is absolutely essential, but it can't be the primary quality of the review. You're right. That's a wonderful analogy. That
I think it's exactly
interviewing is like acting because it's responding.
Yes, and you always hear actors talk about, I do the preparation, and then when it comes time to do it, I throw it away. That preparation has somehow embedded itself within me if I've prepared well enough, so that I don't have to rely on all the stuff I have collected in front of me.
Sure.
By the
way, you asked me which was my favorite interview.
Yeah.
There's so many. I guess if I was made, if there was a fire that was going to burn them all up and the one would remain, it would be the one with John Wayne. Mm-hmm. But I loved the interview with Stockard Channing when she was starting out. Talk about a bright, well-read person.
Yeah.
I hate to tell you how many years ago this was. She was in a picture with Warren Beatty and Jack.
Nicholson, The Fortune.
Yeah. And she was wonderful. She was wonderful. And so that gave me something that nobody else has ever given me, and that kind of youthful, not innocent, but creative thinking and intelligence well-read and enlightened. So that was wonderful. Another one that was wonderful is the interview I had with Lee Brackett, where my little daughter and I drove up into the middle of Ohio, and Lee Brackett made me the worst, most horrible drink of lemonade I ever had. I mean, it was pure sugar. But it was just, she was with her husband, and she was at home and in this pastoral, rural setting, nobody around. And I've even gotten emails from Switzerland that they have listened to the interview with Lee Brackett, and they're so grateful to hear her voice. They'd never heard her voice before. And so that, and coming back, my daughter and I skinny dipped in a lake when nobody was around. So there, you know, these are memories, and I think that's what I almost have those shuttered. And when you talk to me or you present me with the opportunity, I do open doors and get the cobwebs, wipe the cobwebs away and blow the dust away, and there's something there that's kind of shining.
You know,
so almost every interview, I can say, I hope his wife would never hear this, but when I interviewed John Frankenheimer, he was with his girlfriend. Now, I never saw her. It was 8 o'clock in the morning in Chicago, and he was terrific. I really liked John a lot, but when I interviewed John Simon, he was with a married woman hiding from his own girlfriend in the dark in his apartment.
Did you say that John Wayne had his mistress in the house?
Yes, his secretary mistress.
Wow. What is it about guys named John that all had their mistresses?
Well, they're Johns.
Yeah,
they're Johns.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. You know, you mentioned Stockard Channing. I just want to tell you that that's an amazing interview for me, too, because what's most amazing about it for me is the fact that Stockard Channing, here she is, near the beginning of her career, she's getting off of a film that paired her with two of the biggest stars in movies, and she's completely open about what a hard time everyone gave her on that film.
Oh yeah, and the really ironic thing is that the film totally bombed.
Yes.
That it was not a good film. It was kind of a failure.
I got down the elevator and I sat down in this room, and in walked Jack, wearing dark glasses and a mink-lined Levi jacket, hungover, right? Well, he'd finished Chinatown the day before, and then behind him was Warren. It was Warren Beatty, right? Warren Beatty, walked in the door and said, "How do you do?" But I just sat there going, Warren Beatty and Jack Nicholson. And they walked in the room and they were all talking to each other. And I had not opened my mouth to say a word in about 15 minutes. And Mike said, "This is Stockard Channing. She's going to help us out this afternoon." And I realized they don't even know if I'm an actress or not, right? So the first thing I had to say was, if you've seen the movie, was the scene in which Freddie comes out of the airplane, and she says, because originally that was the first thing in the script, and she's in tears, and she's Freddie, and she says, "It was so absolutely hideous to me, I could cry, he cursed me." So I said, well, that's what I have to do. And they're sitting around reading, and I'm not saying a word. You know that nightmare feeling that you haven't said a word, as I'm about to burst into tears and scream in this accent that I think is right. And I'm sitting next to Warren on this couch. The time comes, and I said, well, either do it or do it. Just do it. Do it. So I opened my mouth, and I went, and Warren literally went like that. And he said, he didn't say anything. He just did this sort of look. And then Jack had the next response, and then I said something, and Warren said something. And the next thing we knew, it was like a train getting going, and everybody started acting. And Mike was playing another part in it. We were all just cooking for and it was like musician. It was that's the word I would use. It was cooking. It was like jamming for about 5 hours. At the end of which, Warren stood up and literally reached over and went went, right, which really put me at my ease. Don't you feel totally relaxed? Yeah, he just went, "Pretty good, Stock."
one request that I have, and I think it would be such a tremendous treat for fans of you and fans of Kubrick, I would love for you to scan a letter or two that you received from Kubrick and put it up on your website.
Okay, all right. I did one. I told you, I think I found about 10 letters. And this should be scanned. Unfortunately, I don't have it anymore because it was Kubrick, only one sentence, giving me his personal telephone number. And it says, here, Tony, I forgot to give you this, and he gives me his number and sends it to Stanley.
Did you ever use that number?
To get no, I never did. And I was thinking, now explain to me what your reaction would be if you saw Stanley Kubrick in a group at a media or something. Would you go up to him or not, and why or why not?
I would feel tremendously disappointed in myself if I didn't go up to him, if only to shake his hand and thank him. You know, I wouldn't want to hound him. I wouldn't want to press him or ask him any questions in particular. I would just want the honor of knowing that I said hello and paid my respects.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I would. I mean, I'm not sure I can tell you why. Mm-hmm. Another interview that I would love to have, I think now I appreciate him perhaps much more than I did when I was at my apogee of reviewing, is Paul Newman. I wish I had done Paul Newman, especially talking about Buffalo Bill and the Indians. And he was wearing sunglasses, but he was dangling them. Paul Newman was dangling them from one ear, and every woman thought it was the most sexy thing she'd ever seen. So it was quite an experience. But I interviewed the writer of Buffalo Bill and the Indians, which is kind of based originally on a E. Cummings poem. Well, I interviewed the writer Alan Rudolph, who later became a director and directed Trouble in Mind with Chris Christopherson and a couple of other.
Welcome to L.A. and he's good.
Yes, Welcome to L.A. and Mrs. Parker and the Vicious Circle. But I interviewed him, got back to the hotel room in New York, and it was blank. I think I wept. I think I did. I know I couldn't stand myself. But fortunately, on my next trip to L.A., he gave me another interview, so I got that interview.
What was the story about Buffalo Bill that you articulated some problems that you had with the ending?
No, it was if Robert Altman. Now he never admitted how I may have been instrumental in his changing that film. We had a screening, it was huge audience, and I stood up and I said, have you thought of changing the ending? Because I thought the ending was really, really bad. It didn't work. His films were usually implicit, and it was too explicit as an ending. And he said, absolutely not. He said that in public. Absolutely not. And I explained that I thought he should, but to deaf ears. Well, a while later, he called me personally on the phone and said they were changing the ending. Now, he said somebody up there came up with the idea, but I had certainly made a statement, a clear clarion call that it should be changed. And we had a really interesting conversation about, and I don't know whether it's up on the site or not. I think it is, because I think there's an 8-minute,
yes,
which would be about the length of the phone call. And I was kind of giving him hell because he had, by saying absolutely, he had put it in stone. And he said, well, that's why I'm calling you, because I am changing it. And he never said, because of you, but I would certainly think that here's a time that a critic may have had some subliminal effect.
You planted that notion in his
film.
head.
Yeah. There was something wrong with the ending, and I think he said we never should have had that press conference, and it was too early for that press conference, and he was having problems with the producer, and he kind of knew that the film was going to fail, as it did, and it's one of his very, very best films.
It's a terrific film, but it's absolutely not the film that people wanted to see. You know,
it's not the people that people expected to see. They expected to see. The wonderful thing about it is it's satiric, and the biggest factor in the satire is Newman's performance of himself, the blue-eyed boy, and audiences wanted him to be the charming blue-eyed boy that was powerful and strong and direct, and Newman is saying you are buying, or suggesting you are buying an image of the blue-eyed boy that is not real. I just love the performance. I think it's a.
I do too.
It's a very brave performance.
But that idea, when I answered that question, I remember that. I probably would have said that anyway. But what I was really trying to avoid the attitude. I didn't want the attitude that I was there asking for ideas, or that I was in any way confused about the film.
No, the only thing that professionally I felt was that maybe you could have said, I don't think there'll be any changes. But you said absolutely. I didn't expect you to get off on the ending, but you told me absolutely. And coming back, if I had reported what you had told me, my credibility would have been shot, I think.
I agree with you. That's why I'm on the phone with you. But as I say, that, I'm no more responsible. I mean, at that point, I would have stood by that.
Yeah.
And I was very surprised when I got back, when this other idea did come up.